Medical stellar astrology. The risk of pathologies in the birth chart and the choice of the best moment to start a therapy. The aim of this book is to apply the principles of stellar astrology, as they have already been outlined in some of my previous books, to the field of medical astrology, integrating them with the analysis of planetary configurations. So, in order to have a clearer picture, complete and iconic, thanks to the descriptive role of celestial images, of astrological factors that can lead to serious diseases. In fact, if we disregard the important role played by constellations, asterisms and stars in this area, it is very hard, nearly impossible, to predict whether certain critical factors of the birth chart will manifest as diseases or otherwise, and especially to predict whether these diseases will be serious. And this is because, as always in astrology, serious events are always signaled by a redundancy of astrological factors at various levels. But it becomes very difficult to gauge regarding this redundancy if a number of factors are excluded from the analysis. I refer in particular to the role of celestial images and the various parts composing them, which in most cases also correspond to various parts of the human body. The role of some stars, not only those of Azamina. The importance in these analyses of the heliacal phases of stars and planets and the Paran that accompany them. The parallels of declination between planets and between stars and planets, and other considerations that we expose in the following pages. For this type of research, it is necessary to visualize the birth chart to be examined through Stellarium or another software that allows you to reproduce the sky in its entirety, including all the stars and constellations, as it appeared at the time of birth, given also the important role of angular stars and constellations, which can highlight a certain part of the body. It will also be explained how to use the so-called Azamina stars, whose traditional malefic influence on diseases is fully confirmed by our analysis. According to tradition, they are especially relevant when in conjunction with the moon and the sun. But in reality they can contribute to the onset of serious diseases in other forms as well, although in these other cases further confirmation is needed from other factors in the chart. We will also see from which signs we can understand the seriousness of the diseases and the age when they will manifest themselves, and how those that occur at an older age are usually announced by less numerous and striking signs. Prediction is not limited to the birth chart, but also concerns the years in which the diseases announced at birth may occur. For this purpose, as always, it is necessary to make use of all forecasting techniques, which must be integrated with each other, and then examined together. I refer to directions, progressions, both by longitude and by parallel of declination, and the solar revolution. It is important to include the stars in all these analyses, and in particular the natal stars that announce diseases and that return in the directions and or in the SR with an important role. We will see in the first part of the book what this important role consists of and how to actually conduct this type of analysis. In the second part of the book we will see how all these principles set out in the first part find application in the birth charts of some people who have been afflicted by serious illnesses. We will see what differences there are between the birth charts of those who have died and those who have been saved, which we will discuss in the fourth part, and what useful conclusions for elective astrology we can extract from them. For the same purpose, that is to extract useful indications about the factors that can save lives in medical elective astrology. In the third part we will also examine the birth charts of some great healers in the history of medicine. But above all, we will dedicate a great deal of space to the exposition of important principles of medical elective astrology. I refer both to those we have inherited from the astrological tradition, exposed especially in the fifth part, and to the new ones that can be deduced on the one hand from the general principles of stellar astrology, and on the other hand from the concrete analysis of the birth charts of people who have had serious health problems, both fatal and healing cases, and of the great doctors who have dedicated their lives to the cure of diseases and the research of vaccines that have saved millions of lives. These principles are laid out especially in the first part of the book. We will see how in the birth chart itself are indicated both the planets and stars that can bring us diseases and those that can heal us, and how then in elective astrology we can make use of the latter. When I speak of election, I am referring both to the choice of the best time to start a therapy, and to the choice of the moment in which to celebrate a ritual for healing. We will also see that there are some stars, mostly mercurial or Venusian or Mercurian Jupiterian nature, that can be profitably used in these elections, especially if they also have a role in the birth chart, if they are angular, if they are completing their heliacal phase, and if they form promising parens with the planets. The most effective planet in medical elective astrology is Jupiter, as it also represents the great life-saving medicine. In the fifth part, the traditional principles of medical elective astrology and a series of correspondences between planets, signs, houses, decans and parts of the human body are exposed. And finally an appendix in which it is explained how to identify the stars that can act as an antidote to those that threaten a disease in the birth chart. Once identified, these stars can be used in elective astrology to choose the moment in which to start a therapy. And those who practice astrological magic, they can attract the influence through rituals, possibly aimed at the creation of a talisman star as well. In the course of the exposition I also found a way to include some more general considerations regarding the way to use stars and constellations in the examination of a birth chart. Starting from the assumption that, as the English occultist John Dee affirmed, celestial images are similar to what in magic are called seals, that is, a sort of hieroglyphics or symbols that concentrate in a certain form a series of very wide potentialities of meaning. And it is only their interaction and dialogue with the other stars, planets, constellations and parts of constellations that from time to time come to activate in a certain context some of their possible meanings. That is why I dwell on ways to identify the strongest factors, and therefore the predominant ones over the others, that is such as to direct the effects of the other stars and planets in a certain direction that is compatible with them, instead of others. When working with the constellations it is always necessary to ask ourselves to which celestial image, or part of image, the thing we want to examine resembles more. Sometimes this resemblance is only morphological, other times it is based on an analogy between some of the possible symbolic meanings of the image and the thing itself, and sometimes on both. There are even cases in which this similarity relates exclusively to the name of the thing. For example, the constellation of the crater also has an analogy with the heart, both because it is a hollow organ as well, and because this cup is destined to be filled with a liquid, usually wine. Let's think of the chalice used by Jesus for the Last Supper, and of the Eucharistic wine as a symbol of the blood that would be poured out the next day, and that would flow from the very heart itself, pierced by Longinus' spear. The secret of the great births, both good and bad, lies in these chains of multiple activations of the planets among themselves and with the stars. They cause the native to manifest with great force their symbolic meanings, for good or bad. By great births, I mean here simply all those who manifest with great force and at the highest level some of the possible meanings of certain celestial images. For example, as we will see by examining the birth chart of physicist Heisenberg, father of the so-called uncertainty principle. A possible meaning of all the nebulae and clusters is precisely the one related to the world of elementary particles. Because they are so small and elusive to be difficult to distinguish and define, to the point that it was necessary to recognize a dual nature, corpuscular and undulatory. If they are then clusters that are in front of the face or eyes of a celestial image, or even around, as in the case of the Hyades with respect to Aldebaran, there can be an emphasis on the role of the eyes and the observer in reference to the particles. And if all this is activated by the angularity of these stars, and in addition by their heliacal phases and by powerful and multiple activations by the planets, the native will manifest these meanings with the highest force, and finally if, as in this case, bright stars are also involved, here Aldebaran was rising at birth, the native may become famous precisely for having manifested these meanings at the highest level. Nebulae and clusters, and in particular also facies and oculus, can also be very malefic in some contexts. Indeed, in astrology they are known especially for this. But, as a matter of fact, every star can also be activated in a beneficial way. And this depends on the one hand on the configurations of the planets, on the other hand on the ability of the native to direct certain influences in a constructive way. This is why an accurate analysis of the birth chart, from the point of view of the celestial images that are activated with more force in the ways indicated, is very useful in learning how to direct our choices towards the realization of the most positive and constructive aspects of the relative symbolic meanings. Given that in any case they are destined in one way or another to manifest themselves with great force in our lives, also because we can be certain that, if we do this, heaven will be on our side, as we have a sort of innate aptitude to live and manifest those meanings. And we know that, following the current, we swim easier and faster than when we go against the current. Enjoy the reading.